I want to, because generally most of us are working on characters. And I think we talked a little last semester about binding and how you animate them a little bit, but I want to talk more about that. I have here a model. It's a pre-made model. And actually, it is a free model available from the Smithsonian of Amelia Earhart's flight suit. It seems like a good model for me to mess around with because number one, it's real, and number two, it poses a lot of difficulties. You know when I've told you to make characters, I tell you to make them in a T position. And I tell you that because it makes this part of binding much easier. But even without a T position, you can make this workable. Let me minimize that, and I'll show you in here what we're looking at as a model. It's 100,000 polygons. I reduced it down. It was many more polygons originally. And it's fairly detailed, and I want to be able to get it to do something like do a kick. So what I have to do is I have to get a rig inside of it. I have to make that rig. I have to get the rig inside of it. I have to bind all the points to the rig, and then I have to animate it. And I want to show you that process and what tools we have to help you with that, okay? If there's any questions as we go, feel free to ask. Binding is a process by which we take each point, each vertices, and we tell it to be controlled by something else. Man, are you going to give me vertices? Let me go to the mesh here and then get some. So here's the thing. When we're modeling, you can do all sorts of things and push and pull points and stuff like that. But the way Modo works is once you're done with that, you go into animating. And when you animate, the way you're going to be moving points is either you're going to move the whole object, scale, rotate, and translate it, or you're going to have what's called a deformer to control those points. Skeletons are deformers. What a skeleton will do is it's basically what's called an implicit object, meaning it's an object that is there in the scene but doesn't render. An implicit object inside the geometry that's going to tell each point what to do. Let me go over to setup, which is the window we would be in, to start doing this. I'm going to deselect all my stuff. And I have centered this about as perfectly around 0 as I could get. You can see. It's a little bit off this way, but even here I straightened it up to try to get it as dead centered as I can because this will make some other systems work more directly. That's my 0 point, and you can see by hitting 1, 2, and 3 here that I'm just above the 0 axis on the X and dead center and everything else. And this is a good place to start my skeleton from. Back here. I might actually go this way, go to back, so that I'm seeing it in its front view from here. And I'm going to go under setup, which gives me this skeleton tool. Now, once I pick that, I can start creating a skeleton that will control this. The properties for that skeleton are here. And there's several important things going on here. This one here, intersection. If I have that on, when I draw skeletal elements, they will try to go as close to in between the front and back surface of the object as they can. And I'm going to show that to you. I have symmetry off, and I'm going to start with the hips, which is where I'd want to control her by, or her suit by. So I'm going to put a click here, which is going to put the first element in place. And then I'm going to build a spine. Go here, and I'll give it, it doesn't need that many joints here. This is one that the arms will hang off of, and this is one that will control the upper body. And let me go back to this view here to show you what having intersection did. You see how that's just about perfectly halfway in between the front and the back? That's because I had intersection on. If I didn't have that on, it wouldn't do that. And to get these points to bind well, I need to have my skeleton as close to halfway in between all the points that it's supposed to control as possible. Plus, I have to have it totally inside of the object it's going to control. Let me now work on legs, and I'm going to try something with legs that I have a feeling won't work because this isn't perfectly symmetrical. But if I was perfectly symmetrical, it would work better. I'm going to want legs to come off of this joint. So I'm going to click this joint, and now I'm going to start drawing legs this way, but I'm going to turn symmetry on across the x-axis. And that means if I draw a joint here, it should draw me a joint here too. Let's go here. And it did, but you see my symmetry isn't close enough. This is too non-symmetrical of an object. This would be where my knee would be, and this would be where the rest of the leg is for that to work. If I had an object that was perfectly symmetrical, that would work much better. We're going to undo that because it's not going to go. I'm going to turn off symmetry, and I'll draw each leg separately. Did I just add an extra one? Let me see here. Shifted A. And I think I did, so I'm going to Control Z that to undo it. And I'm in add mode. By the way, I can change modes to edit, insert, and modify my skeletons. And so you know, like when we're parenting for forward kinematics, the skeletal rig is already parented. See? And I can change this later if I want to, but it's building itself up as a parented rig to begin with. Let me click that again to make sure it's selected. Now I'm going to try one leg. We'll say the thigh joint will be here. And let me go down a bit. We'll say that the knee is here, and we'll put this as the bottom. And now let's go back and select this joint again, and I'll put the other thigh here, and I'll put this here. That's probably a little high, but I can fix that later. I'll show you. And I'll put this here. And if I look at what we have now, this skeletal joint is my root. It's where everything starts from, and it's basically right where the hips are. If I open this up, you'll see this connects up like that, and underneath it, it's going to have the legs, which are here and here. That's one leg. That's the other leg. And it's done that all for me. Now, just like anything else in this pile, I can move that around if I need to later. Right now, I don't need to, and this will probably going to be fine. I'm going to hit A, and I'm going to rotate around it to see if it's nicely centered, which it is, although on the bottom here, I might have to adjust something. Let me do the arms. Although, look at that. I lost a joint here somewhere. Oh, I probably overdid something. You know what? Let's see what joint that is. Control Z, my way out of here. I've actually found it, like many things in 3D, it's easier to start over than it is to fix something. This is actually a perfect example of that because this is a mess. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to start over. Let's go back to my front view here, which is like that. We'll switch this to back because I'm facing the wrong way. And let me go back to my skeleton tool. Again, we'll start with a hip here. We'll make a couple joints for the spine, one joint for the arms, and one joint to handle the head there. And now let's do the leg. And let me turn this on to make sure that my intersection is on, which is good. This will be our first leg. And we'll do one for the knee, one down the rest of it there. And let me select this joint again, and we'll do the other leg. One there, and one here. And let's take a look at what we have right there. That's all fairly nicely centered. I like what I'm seeing. Let me go back up and we'll do the arms. I'm going to pick this joint for the arms to come off of, so I'm going to click it first, and then I'll click out here for where shoulder starts from, and we'll put an elbow there, and we'll put the end of the arm here. And now, let's do the same over here. I'm going to pick this joint again. We're going to click. We'll do the elbow, and we'll do the end of the arm there. And I'm going to hit escape, which will drop me the tool. And I'm going to take a look around and just see if it looks nicely centered. It does, though I can do some small adjustments here if I want to. If I want this to be tucked in more and I just select it, This is before I've enveloped anything. I can place things more carefully so that I know that they are all inside. Like that's slightly outside. I'm going to push it up so it's totally inside of my skeleton. And I'm going to hit A like that and back out a little and rotate around it here. And let's see where the neck is there. The neck looks okay. The other arm looks okay. I'm going to push this in a little bit like that. And I would say I'm ready for a bind. Binding is how I tell all of these points to be controlled by all of this stuff. Let me go back over here under commands. I now have a parented rig here. These are actually going to be, well, there we go. That's each leg. This is the root of the spine. And if I go here, I bet we'll find eventually the arms. There's the arms coming. And let's see where that is. That's the neck. This is one arm. This is the other arm. That's all put together. I could rearrange it if I want to, the same way I rearrange parented objects by just dragging them around, but I don't need to do that right now. So let's talk about getting this geometry being controlled by this rig. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to put them next to each other, because this makes selecting both of them easier for me. You'll see why momentarily. Another thing I should do is save. I don't do that enough. You don't want to lose all the work of this, so I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to call this Amelia Skell 1, so we know it has the skeleton in it. Good. Now I go to the binding. Binding is down here under Deformers. And to bind, I have to be in setup mode. Like I was saying before, when you're working in Modo, you model in one space where you can push and pull points and do stuff, and you animate in another where you can keyframe objects and deform geometry, but you don't have the same control you had as a modeler. This, when I click setup in the setup mode and we get the yellow box, this is a space in between where I animate and where I was modeling. What that space is about is it's about saying, when I'm in setup, I'm going to disregard all of my animation information, but I'm going to enable you to control stuff with deformers. The only way I can bind a skeleton to a mesh is when I'm in this setup mode. I have to select both things. If I select my skeleton, and then shift select the mesh, bind lights up. Do you see that? Before it didn't. If I select only one of these, it should eventually give me no bind, yes. See, no bind, no bind. When I select both, bind. If I turn off setup, can I bind? Nope. I have to be in setup to bind. I click the bind button, and these questions are the big questions. How am I going to control those points? The best possible way is something called a heat map. And you'll see when I do it, it turns off a lot of the other controls. For the heat map to work, my geometry has to be perfect, meaning I should have gone under geometry and cleaned it up, which I did earlier. And my skeleton has to be totally inside of my object. And if I hit OK, we'll find out very quickly if that's right. It might take a little bit, because it's now figuring out what points are going to be controlled by what bones. This is why I save, because I'm always worried it's going to get a little, dicey. Okay, that's a very good sign. And it made this thing called Normalizing Folder. Good. That's just what I want a Normalizing Folder to look like. This is what's called a Vertex Map. Basically, each bone is given a color. And the idea is that the color on the vertex tells how that vertex, that point, is going to be controlled. So at the end here, almost all those vertices should be controlled by this bone, whereas in the middle here, they should be about a 50-50 mix, which is what I want them to be. Now, if this worked, I can go to animate, but I still have that yellow box. I have to leave setup. I'm sorry. Let me go back here and turn off setup, and then go to animate. And then if I grab an element here like that, and I rotate it like this, it should animate, which it does, which is good. This is what I'm looking for. But it's stretching. I imagine this suit was made out of some sort of unpleasant canvas so that it really should sag and pull down like that, not like balloon out like that. I could get away with it ballooning out like this, but I'd prefer it to look more realistic. So I can do something called weight painting. Weight painting allows me to change the way that those points are influenced. And it takes place back in this setup window over here. Weighting has its own window. I'm looking at the animated version of this. If I go back to setup, it will jump back to the non-animated version. I prefer to work in the animated version so I can see what the problem is. My problem here is that this stuff should be controlled by this yellow bone and this green bone, and not at all by this here magenta bone. What I need to do is I need to get rid of magenta there. I have a number of painting tools here, and actually, this is the one I think I want. I'm going to pick this bone, good, and I'm going to go scale down, and I think I picked the mesh. Do I have to pick the mesh? I'll figure that out momentarily. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick the bone, because it's easier to see it from here. See, sometimes it will leap back for me there. Is it that one? Yes, it's that one. Good. So you see when I selected that, it's now lit up all of this stuff that is controlled by what at this point is the red bone. Now I want this stuff to be less influenced by it, so I'm going to paint. I hold down my right mouse button, and this is the size of my brush. I'll make my brush about that big, and I'm going to start painting away value here. Come on. This can be a slow process. As I do it, you should see it start to pull back. There's a fairly large number of polygons on this, about 100,000. Come on, scale back. And I'm going to give it a second. You can see some of this is starting to pull apart. I don't want to do it too much or else it will get a little extreme. And I can turn around this thing so I can see more precisely, like under here I want to clean it out. Let me change my brush size. I'll change it a lot like that, and I'm going to try to increase the amount it's going to remove a lot. I'm going to try to rub a paint mark right up the side here. You see the points jumping back? Watch. Did you see that? Did you get some idea of that? No? Yes? Maybe? Sort of? This can take a while, clearly, and if you mess up, you can always Control-Z and undo. You are literally modifying what's called the Vertex Map, which is a mapping of a color value to each point so that it will better reflect what you want it to do. It's not a fast process. It's a much faster process, by the way, if you have a lower res model. The original model we were looking at, which is 1 million freaking polygons, I would not be able to do this on. This is 100,000 polygons, and you see it's not pretty. If I'm at 20,000 polygons or so, I'm probably a lot happier. Let me rub a little bit more of this on here. A little bit more. You can imagine me doing this for a while, right? Or you doing it when you need to fix this. Primarily, I will say this, when you're in T position and you skeletonize, you have much fewer problems here and much fewer problems here. That's one of the reasons T position is good. It's when you're not in T position you start to get issues like this. And when you get geometry that's close to each other, it's very hard for the bones to know what they're supposed to influence. So ideally, it's like many other things in life. If you do better planning in the pre-production process, you have less work in the post-production process, but, you know, your mileage may vary, as they say. Let's take a look at that and see if it's... Back here I have some weirdness going on, so let me just rub a little bit more there. to get rid of some of the stuff. I'm also wondering if a smaller brush is going to help me. I'll try using a smaller brush and see if it doesn't freak out on me. Come on, give me a smaller brush. Right mouse button gives me a brush size when this is done. Okay, almost. Good. We'll make the brush like that. And I'll zoom in a lot like this. And let's see if this is going to give me better control. I should say better control faster. And the answer is no, it's not. It's still taking a whole long time. And it's going to give me some weird settings on it too. You'll notice we have other choices here. We have smooth selected, which will smooth differences between them. If I get like some geometry pulling out and then other geometry not pulling out, I might have to smooth it to push it back down. Plus, I can actually paint with a bone. Like, let's say I'm going to pick this chest bone over here, and you see how weak the influence of that chest bone is. Let's paint with it. And what this is going to do is at 93%, this is going to paint all the polygons around it to be controlled mostly by that one bone. I should show you something else here because it's related. The normalizing folder. The normalizing folder is how this stuff is controlled. Ooh, isn't that weird? That's where my painting got out of control. The normalizing folder actually controls this whole map in here, and it dictates how many things control our skeleton. If you look here, maximum number of sources says only 3 bones can control each point. If I did this, and this will probably make it look uglier, yep, I lessen the number of bones that are controlling something. If I had something like an actual skeleton where I wanted the bones to be rigid, I would actually go to 1, and this is going to look pretty awful, so that every vertices is only controlled by 1 bone, exactly. And I can switch that around if need be. Generally, more bones make things look smoother, but make it trickier to control things. I'll go to 6. And what that means is that each point could have a mix of 6 different influences, which is a lot. Generally, at 2 or 3, it's fine. And if I turn off limit sources, we're also fine. This will take a second to catch up with us here. As again, this is fairly dead stuff. Come on, come back to me. You can do it. Eventually, it's going to do it. I'm going to try rotating it, see if it's thinking. It's thinking. Oh, there it goes. See, it went back. Good graphics cards help with this a lot. I'm going to turn off limit sources. And I'm going to decide I want to lose that entire bind. If I want to reset my binding, I go to Normalizing Folder, and I hit delete. My binding's gone. I can then rebind. I could use some other tools to bind if I want to. Now, let's open a different scene where I've worked out more of this. There we go. Amelia rigged, kicked, and painted. Okay. This is the same model. And she has a full skeleton in her. And I'm going to go under Animate. Has a basic animation of a kick. Now you note that's fairly slow as it's moving because of the geometry. Once I have my envelope set up, I can turn off my geometry. And then this should play fine. Play. See? So from here, it could be much easier to animate. All I'm animating here, and I'm going to stop the playing, is the rotations on the various joints. So if I pick this joint here, you'll see we have 2 keyframes there. And I prefer when I work in this mode to open up something, which is over here, to have this bar over on my left. My right, I should say. This bar just gives me the items I can pick and also a means of selecting joints and what have you. So, for example, this joint here is the root. This is going to dictate how far the whole model moves. And you'll see I have two keyframes, so if I want this to take place over more time, for example, I'm going to select these two and push them back, and now the traveling is going to take longer. But because of that, I now have to modify how long the kick takes, which is here. I'll pull these ones over like that. And we'll go like that. Now, let's pick something else to animate. I'm going to play with the spine a little bit. I'm going to put a slight rotation on that spine so that it appears that she's leaning forward. We'll select it here. And actually, we have some animation on it right now in the rotation channels. I'll rotate it further forward, like that, which means we get that. And I'll also bend the head or the neck down. There's no keyframes on that now, so let's keyframe it. We'll head out to where the kick ends roughly, and we'll rotate it forward a bit, and maybe a little bit that way too. And let's, that's good at saving. I should save too because I'll lose the work otherwise. Let's also make the hands straighten out. We'll take the elbows. I wonder if we can do both elbows at once. I think we can. We have a key on them at the first place. We'll get out to here, and we'll key them. I probably shouldn't do them both at once. So I'm going to do them just one at a time. Give me just one. And put yourself down like that. Good, and let me pick this one over here and put yourself down like that. And let's see how that's looking now. Now let's look at it with, we'll do a play on this. So this is the action we're going to get. Let's see from here. Now we want to see it with geometry. Let's flip our geometry on. And I can't see that in playback. All I can really see is this kind of slow one. This is where I want to generate a quick Opengl Preview, which is over here. Preview GL, and we know it's only 24 frames. So when this gets to frame 30, actually 40 or 50, I'm going to stop it. And that's us running at speed. And actually, I can see that that's way too slow. Right from there, I know that I would have to move all of the action back. There's a thing, and I wonder if I can get away with it. If I double click, I should get everything all at once. Man, I hope this works. I should be able to push back the keyframes. Good. And I'll push these ones back too. Oh man, I hope, you know what I'm going to try and do? I'm going to try and select a bunch of them. Come on, select. Good. And push them all back at once. And then select these ones too. Come on. And we'll push these ones back as well. And let's see if that's going to freak us out. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's turn off the geometry, because the geometry will make it harder for me to see the timing. Come on. Okay, it's happening quicker, but she's still sliding too far. But that's easy to fix, actually. That's here. And that is strictly translations, actually, here. I think that's where that is. Translations. There we go. I got to pull these ones back to probably about here. Further. That's better. So I'm able to select all those channels at once and move all that animation at once. And let's take another look at that with our geometry. I'm going to go back to that preview GL, which is over here. By the way, the settings on this, this is the start of my scene. Let's make the scene just run to 40 frames to make everything easier. Okay, and then preview GL, full resolution is right. Let's hit abort and we'll get what we have there. Okay, what do you think about the timing on that? It's better, yes, than the last one, right? And you see, I might have to go back in and tweak it more and more to get it to do what I want to do. This, folks, is creating a skeleton in a parented structure for forward kinematics and then binding it to geometry to animate it. Okay? I'm going to stop this capture.